The wind screamed across the frozen plains. Snow whipped against the small human outpost, rattling its weak metal walls inside the engineer's cabin. Daniel sat by the broken heater, rubbing his hands together. The storm had cut off power hours ago, and the temperature kept dropping. He had wrapped himself in 2 blankets, but the cold still bit into his bones. The radio crackled faintly, but there was no signal. He was alone. The rest of the crew had gone to the main base before. The storm hit. Daniel had stayed behind to repair a vital power relay. But now he was stuck. Every breath felt like ice in his lungs, and his fingers were starting to go numb outside. The snow piled higher against the door, sealing him inside. He tried not to think about the stories, the ones about creatures that roamed the snow at night. Large, fast, and strong, with glowing eyes that could see through the dark. The locals called them wolfkin. Daniel had never seen one up close. But the idea of meeting one in this storm made his heart race. He told himself it was just superstition. Still, he checked the safety on his sidearm twice. Then it came a sound through the howling wind. At first, he thought it was just the shifting snow, but then it grew louder. Sharper, a low, deep growl. Daniel froze, his breath catching in his throat. The growl was followed by heavy thuds in the snow, moving closer. His mind screamed for him to lock the door tighter, but before he could move, the handle turned. The door burst open. Snow blasting inside, a huge shape stumbled through. Slamming the door shut with one clawed hand, she was tall, covered in thick, silver-gray fur. Her shoulders broad, her eyes golden and fierce. A wolf, alien, female, and injured. Blood streaked her left arm, staining the white fur dark. Her breathing was heavy, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Daniel reached for his weapon, but she raised one clawed hand in warning. Her voice was deep but shaky, her words broken. Not enemy, cold, killing. She looked around the cabin, then at the tiny pile of blankets. Her gaze locked on him, and her ears twitched. You, warm, or both, die. Before Daniel could react, she moved toward him. Her massive frame crouched down, and she pulled the blankets wide. Her fur brushed his face as she slid in beside him. The heat from her body was intense, shocking after hours of freezing air. Her scent was wild. Snow, earth, and something faintly metallic. Daniel tensed, unsure if she meant to help him or eat him. Her long arms wrapped around his back, pulling him close. Her thick fur trapped the warmth between them. His instinct told him to push her away, but the cold had made him weak. And she was right. Without her warmth, he might not make it through the night. The storm raged on outside, but inside, the cabin became strangely silent. Only the sound of her steady breathing and the faint thump of her heart reached him. Daniel tried to speak, but she placed a clawed finger gently against his lips. Sleep. Safe now, she murmured. Her voice had a strange weight to it, not a command, but a promise. Still, unease crawled in the back of his mind. Her grip was firm, almost possessive, as if she wasn't just keeping him warm, but holding him in place. Minutes turned into hours. Daniel drifted in and out of sleep. Each time he woke, her golden eyes were open, watching him silently. He wondered if she feared something outside, or if she was watching for something else entirely. Once, he felt her muzzle brush against his neck, her warm breath sending a shiver down his spine. She made a low sound, almost like a purr, before resting her head against him again. The storm showed no sign of ending, and Daniel, caught between exhaustion and confusion, finally gave in to the warmth. But as sleep began to take him, a thought echoed in his mind. This wasn't just survival for her. There was something in her eyes, in the way she held him. Something that made him feel like she had claimed him for reasons he didn't yet understand. Outside, the wind screamed. But inside, Daniel's fate had quietly changed forever. Asterisk, a pale light filtered through the frost-covered window. The storm had finally passed, but the cold still lingered like a shadow in the air. Daniel opened his eyes slowly, feeling the weight of something warm pressed against his side. It took him a moment to remember the wolf alien. She was still there. Her arms loosely wrapped around him, her golden eyes half closed but awake. He moved carefully, trying not to disturb her. Her fur caught the weak morning light, each strand glistening with tiny crystals of melted snow. When he sat up, the blanket slipped from his shoulder, and he felt a sudden sting on his neck. He reached up, his fingers brushing over raised skin, lines that were not there before. He pulled a small mirror from his pack, turned it, and froze. 3. Claw-like streaks curved across his neck and down to his collarbone. The skin was not cut deep, but it was marked, reddish and fresh. It didn't look like a wound from the storm. It looked deliberate. What the hell? He muttered under his breath. The wolf alien's voice answered him before he could say more. "You are mine now," she said simply. Her tone wasn't threatening. It was certain. Like stating the color of the sky, Daniel turned to face her. Confused and annoyed, "I didn't agree to." "Whatever this is," he replied, her head tilted slightly, her sharp ears flicking. "Not agree." "Bond choose," she said in her broken English. He shook his head, rubbing the strange mark again. "What bond?" "We were just trying not to freeze to death," he argued. But she only stared at him with those golden eyes that seemed to see more. Then he wanted, share warmth in storm. "Life join, no break," she said. The words hit him strangely, as if they carried more weight than he understood. Daniel stood and moved toward the cabin door, but she rose quickly, blocking his path. Her presence filled the small space, her fur brushing the ceiling. "You go, others see mark." "Danger," she warned. "What danger?" he asked, frustration growing. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Rivals smell bond. They take you, kill me." The words sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the cold. He didn't understand all of her customs, but the way she said it made it clear this wasn't just a superstition. This bond meant something serious to her people, and it painted a target on his back. Daniel wasn't sure if she was exaggerating, but the memory of her watching him all night suddenly felt different. She hadn't just been guarding against the storm, she had been guarding him. He tried to keep his voice steady. "Look, Rava." "If that's your name, Rava," she confirmed, tapping her chest. "Fine, Rava," he continued. "I'm not part of your clan. I'm human. We don't do this bond thing." Her ears flattened slightly, and a low growl rumbled. In her throat, "You human. Yes. But Mark, make you mine in eyes of all wolfkin." Daniel wanted to laugh it off, but her serious tone made it impossible. He glanced toward the window and saw dark shapes moving far off in the snow. Rava's eyes narrowed, and she moved to the door, sniffing the air. "Too soon," she muttered. "They come." Daniel's heart began to pound. "Who's coming?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled a curved blade from a strap across her back and handed him a shock baton from his pack. "Hold this. Stay close," she said. The shapes in the distance grew larger, tall, furred figures, like her, but wearing armor and carrying long spears. Daniel could already feel the tension in the air. "They smell the mark," Rava explained, her voice low. "They know you bonded to me. They want to break bond. Take you as prize." "That's insane," Daniel muttered. But the look in her eyes told him she wasn't joking. The figures moved faster now, their forms breaking into a run. Rava stepped in front of him, her body lowering into a predator's stance. The cabin door rattled as the first of them reached it. A deep voice called out in a language Daniel didn't understand. Rava replied sharply, her tone almost a snarl. Then the wood splintered, and the door crashed open. 3 wolfkin warriors stepped inside. their eyes flicking between Daniel and Rava. One of them laughed, a short, sharp sound. Bond with prey. He mocked in accented English. Rava's claws extended, and her voice was a low growl. Not prey, she said. Mate. The word made Daniel's stomach twist, not because of the meaning, but because of the danger it seemed to invite. The lead warrior pointed at Daniel. Give him, or fight, he said. Rava didn't move, her muscles tensed, her golden eyes locked on theirs. Daniel gripped the baton tighter. He didn't know exactly what this bond meant for him, but he were starting to realize one thing. Walking away from it might not be an option anymore. The three wolfkin warriors stood in the broken doorway, their breath steaming in the cold air. Rava didn't move an inch, her claws still out, her body blocking Daniel completely. Daniel felt the heat of her presence, even through the freezing air, and a part of him knew she wasn't bluffing. She would fight them all if needed. Still, he whispered under his breath, "You don't have to do this for me." Her ear twitched, and without turning her head, she answered, "Not for you." For us, the lead warrior stepped forward, his heavy boots crunching against the ice on the floor. "You shame your blood, Rava," he said in accented English. Bonding with prey is dishonor. Daniel bristled at the word prey, but Rava's tail flicked once, a subtle warning for him to stay silent. "Better prey than traitor," she shot back, her voice low and steady. The warrior's nostrils flared, and he pointed the tip of his spear toward Daniel. "Release him, and your debt will be forgotten." Rava's golden eyes narrowed. "Bond once, bond forever," she said firmly. Daniel wanted to interrupt, to explain that he wasn't part of any forever, but something in her voice kept him quiet. The air between the warriors thickened, the tension almost visible. Then, with a sharp motion, the lead warrior jerked his head toward the door. The three of them turned and left, without another word, their heavy steps fading into the snowstorm outside. Daniel finally let out the breath he'd been holding. What was that? "Why did they just leave?" he asked. "They test you," Rava replied, still watching the doorway. "They see if I defend." Her gaze finally shifted to him, and she took a slow breath. "Now they tell others." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, his fingers brushing against the fresh mark again. "I need to understand what this means," he said. "This bond thing. What happens if we just forget about it?" Rava shook her head slowly. "Not forget. Bond is vow, in blood and warmth." She said, "Break vow. Clans hunt you." Daniel blinked, unsure if she was exaggerating. "You mean? They'd actually kill me for this?" Her silence was answer. "Enough." She stepped closer, crouching so her golden eyes met his. "In our law, bond is life," she said. "To break is death." Daniel felt a pit open in his stomach. He wanted to argue, to tell her that human laws didn't work like that. But he remembered the way those warriors had looked at him like he was a stolen prize, and he wasn't sure human laws mattered out here. Rava stood and began packing supplies from the cabin into a weathered satchel. "We go to safe place," she said. "Far from clans." Daniel hesitated. "Where exactly is this safe place?" he asked. Her ears twitched again. "High Ridge, old mine, my territory," she said. "No rival cross." They stepped out into the snow, the storm now calmer but still biting cold. Daniel trudged beside her, his boots sinking into the deep drifts. After a while, he noticed her slowing her pace so he could keep up. Wasn't obvious, but it was deliberate. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You don't even know me." Rava's answer came without hesitation. "Bond make us one." I know enough. Hours later, as the sun began to dip, they reached a jagged ridge where black stone cut through the white snow. Rava led him into a narrow cave, the air inside warmer than he expected. She lit a small fire, the glow reflecting in her eyes as they sat near it. she began to speak more openly. In my people, bond is not just heat and storm. She explained, it is promised to fight, to protect, to share breath until last day. Daniel stared into the flames, trying to absorb the weight of her words. To you, it was just survival, she continued. But to me, to my kind, it is everything. Her tone wasn't accusing, it was calm, almost sad. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I didn't mean to. I wasn't trying to claim you, he said. Her lips curled slightly in something between a smile and a grimace. Bond choose, not you, she repeated before he could answer. A sound echoed faintly from the cave entrance, the crunch of snow under heavy boots. Rava's head snapped up, her ears locking forward. They follow, she murmured, her hand already on her blade. Daniel felt his grip tighten on the shock. Baton, two shadows moved against the fading light outside the cave. Rava's eyes flashed gold in the firelight. Stay behind me, she said. If they test you again, this time, we fight together. The shadows at the mouth of the cave grew larger. Snow crunched under heavy boots, slow and deliberate. Daniel's breath misted in the cold air, his grip tight on the shock baton. Rava moved forward with the silent confidence of a predator, her broad frame shielding him from view. The golden firelight caught the edge of her blade, turning it into a streak of molten light. Two wolfkin warriors stepped inside, ducking their heads under the jagged rock. Their armor was thick leather, patched with metal plates, their fur matted with snow. They carried long spears tipped with curved steel hooks. One sniffed the air and sneered, still hiding with prey. He said in his own language, though his tone needed no translation. Rava's low growl rumbled in the narrow cave, vibrating against the walls. You have no right here, she said, her English rough but sharp. The taller warrior tilted his head toward Daniel. Then let him prove he is worthy, he replied. Switching to English, Daniel stiffened. What does that mean? He asked quietly. It means, Rava said, without looking back at him. They will try to take you, unless we stop them. Her stance widened, her blade lowering slightly. The two warriors spread apart, their movements slow but deliberate. Testing her defenses, Rava didn't wait. With a sudden burst, she lunged forward. Her blade flashing in the firelight, the first warrior blocked her strike with his spear. The sound of metal scraping on metal ringing through the cave. The second moved toward Daniel, his eyes locked on him like a predator sighting prey. Daniel's pulse spiked, and without thinking, he stepped sideways. Bringing the shock baton up, the warrior swung the spear low, aiming for his legs. Daniel jumped back, the tip slicing through the edge of his boot. Rava roared, the sound filling the cave. Her blade struck the first warrior's shoulder, forcing him back, but she couldn't protect both of them at once. Daniel knew if he froze now, he'd be dragged out into the snow, and Rava would be left to fight alone. The second warrior lunged at him again, and this time Daniel swung the baton hard. The crackle of electricity lit the air as the baton connected with the warrior's side. The alien snarled, staggering back, but not falling. Daniel's arms shook from the impact, but adrenaline kept him moving. He ducked another swing and jabbed the baton into the warrior's thigh. This time, the warrior dropped to one knee, his teeth bared. Rava slammed her shoulder into the first attacker, knocking him into the cave wall. The sound of cracking stone echoed, and dust rained down from above. She turned just in time to see Daniel holding his ground. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and there was something there. Not just approval, but pride. Good, she growled. Before spinning back to her fight, Daniel pressed his advantage, shoving the warrior back toward the entrance. Snow blew in through the opening, swirling around their feet. The warrior tried to rise, but Daniel swung the baton again, knocking the spear from his hands. It clattered against the cave wall and slid into the darkness. The first warrior snarled something in their language, grabbing his wounded comrade and dragging him toward the exit. They retreated into the snowstorm, their heavy footsteps fading until only the wind remained. Rava lowered her blade slowly, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. Daniel leaned against the wall, his heart pounding in his ears. The air smelled of snow, smoke, and something sharp like metal and adrenaline. You fight. Well, for prey, Rava said finally. Daniel gave a short laugh, still catching his breath. Not prey, he replied. Not anymore. Her mouth twitched into the faintest smile. No, not anymore, she agreed. They rebuilt the fire, the flames crackling warmly against the cave walls. Rava handed him a strip of dried meat from her satchel. As he ate, she sat across from him, her golden eyes studying him with new interest. You will be tested again, she warned, but now they will know you are not weak. Daniel nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand her people's ways. But he knew one thing. He had passed some kind of trial tonight. When the fire burned low, Rava lay down on the furs near the wall. She patted the space beside her without looking at him. Daniel hesitated for only a moment before lying down, the warmth of her fur chasing away the cold. Outside, the wind howled. Over the ridge, inside, the silence between them was no longer awkward. It was something else, something that felt unspoken, but solid. The fire burned low in the cave. Daniel woke to the faint sound of Rava's voice. Speaking in her own language, low and tense, she stood near the entrance, speaking into a small communicator, her back to him. The tone of her words told him enough. Something was wrong when she turned. Her golden eyes were sharper than usual. They know, she said simply. Daniel sat up, rubbing his eyes. Who knows? He asked. Rava stepped closer, crouching so her shadow covered him in the firelight. My old mate, she said. The word mate carrying a weight that made Daniel's chest tighten. Alpha of Bloodfang Clan. The name meant nothing to Daniel, but the way she said it told him everything. Let me guess. He's not happy you've bonded with me, he said dryly. Her ears twitched. And her gaze didn't waver. He will come, she replied. He will not ask. He will take. Daniel swallowed hard. And I'm guessing he's bigger than me. Rava's lip curled in something like a smirk. Bigger than me, she corrected, and stronger. Daniel exhaled slowly. So what's the plan? Run? She shook her head. No run. He follow? Always. She began unpacking her satchel, laying out pieces of gear, leather armor reinforced with bone plates, sharpened blades and small metal hooks. Daniel frowned. That's a lot of weapons. Training, she said simply, tossing him a pair of thick gloves. The next hours were a blur of movement. Rava drilled him in how to hold his stance, where to strike on a wolfkin's body, how to use his smaller size to his advantage. Again and again, she made him dodge her strikes, correcting his posture with a push of her claws. You move like prey, she growled at first. We make you move like hunter. Daniel's muscles burned, his breath coming in short bursts, but every time he landed a clean strike against her guard. She gave a short nod of approval. By the time they stopped, the cave smelled of sweat and smoke. Daniel collapsed onto the furs, staring up at the jagged ceiling. You're really serious about this? He said. Yes, Rava replied, without hesitation. Bond is fight together or die together. Her voice held no trace of doubt. It wasn't just a cultural rule to her, it was truth. Daniel wasn't sure when it happened. But somewhere between her teaching him to aim for the throat and shoving him out of the path of a mock strike, he started believing it too. They ate in silence. The tension between them heavier than the cold outside. Finally, Daniel broke it. What happens if I win? He asked. Rava looked at him for a long moment, her golden eyes unreadable in the flickering firelight. "Then you are Alpha," she said. "No one can take you from me, and if I lose?" He asked quietly. Her claws tapped against the stone floor, slow and deliberate. "Then I fight to take you back, even if I die." Daniel's throat tightened at the matter-of-fact way she said it. He wanted to tell her she didn't have to risk herself for him, but he knew it would be pointless. Instead, he just said, "Then I guess I better not lose." Her mouth twitched again, that almost smile he was starting to recognize. "Good," she said simply. That night he lay down. Beside her again, the wind outside screamed across the ridge, carrying with it the distant howls of other wolfkin. Daniel closed his eyes, but the sound sent a shiver down his spine. It wasn't the storm this time. It was the hunt, somewhere out there. The Bloodfang Alpha was closing in, and every hour that passed brought him closer. When dawn came, the sky was pale and heavy with clouds. Rava woke him with a sharp nudge, tossing him a strip of dried meat. "We move," she said. They left the cave and climbed higher into the ridge, snow crunching under their boots. From the top, Daniel could see far across the white expanse. And there, in the distance, dark shapes moved larger than the ones they'd faced before. Rava's voice was low but steady. "Tomorrow night. He comes. The snow fell in slow, heavy flakes." The world outside the ridge was silent except for the crunch of approaching footsteps. Daniel stood in the open clearing, the cold biting through his armor. Beside him, Rava's presence felt like a wall of heat and fury. Her golden eyes never left the shadows at the far edge of the clearing. From those shadows emerged a figure taller than any wolfkin Daniel had seen. Broad shoulders, thick fur streaked with battle scars, eyes like burning embers. He wore no helmet. His muzzle was bare, his teeth sharp and bared in a grin. "Rava, Alva." The Alpha growled in his own language before switching to English. "You always choose the hard path." Rava stepped forward, claws glinting under the pale light. "I choose my path," she said, her voice steady. The Alpha's gaze slid to Daniel. "And you?" he said slowly. "You think you are mate to her?" Daniel forced himself to meet his eyes. "I don't think," he said. "I know." The Alpha's grin widened. "Then we settle by the old law," he said. Rava's tail twitched once. The only sign of her tension, Daniel already knew what was coming: the fight, the challenge. The one chance to prove himself or lose everything. The other wolfkin warriors formed a wide circle in the snow. Their eyes gleamed in the dim light, their breath misting in the cold air. One of them tossed a heavy spear into the center of the ring. "No weapons but what's given," the Alpha said, stepping forward. Daniel picked up the spear. Feeling its weight, it was longer than anything he'd trained with, the wood cold. Under his gloves, the Alpha moved first, fast for his size. Daniel barely had time to raise the spear as the massive claws slashed toward him. The force of the blow rattled his bones. He stumbled back, planting his feet in the snow. Voice cut through the cold. "Breathe, watch, strike only when sure." Daniel sidestepped the next charge, driving the spear forward. The tip scraped across the Alpha's armor, not deep enough to harm. The Alpha's laugh was low and mocking. "You fight like prey," he said, circling. Daniel tightened his grip, his heart pounding in his ears. He remembered Rava's training. Smaller means faster. Faster means harder to catch. When the Alpha lunged again, Daniel didn't meet him head-on. He pivoted, letting the spear slide past the Alpha's side. The wood struck hard against his ribs, and for the first time, the Alpha grunted. The circle of warriors murmured, their sharp eyes following every move. The Alpha turned, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Better," he said, "but not enough, this time." The Alpha fainted, then swept his leg. Daniel hit the ground hard, the air knocked from his lungs. The spear slid across the snow, out of reach. The alpha loomed over him. Claws raised. A deep, instinctive fear gripped Daniel. But so did something else. The image of Rava standing. Alone if he failed, he rolled, grabbing a fistful of snow and shoving it into the alpha's eyes. The bigger wolfkin roared, stumbling back. Daniel lunged for the spear, grabbing it and swinging low. The tip caught the alpha's leg, slicing through. Fur and flesh, the warriors around them growled in approval, the sound rumbling through the clearing. The alpha snarled, his movements now sharper, angrier. He lunged with both claws. But Daniel ducked, using the spear to push himself up under the alpha's guard. With a shout, Daniel drove the shaft into the alpha's side, just below the armor. The big wolfkin staggered, his breath steaming in sharp bursts. The circle fell silent, except for the sound of wind. The alpha dropped to one knee, his claws pressing into the snow. Daniel stood over him, the spear still in his hands. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the alpha's head dipped slightly, the gesture of yield. "You are not prey," he said quietly. The warriors around them lowered their heads in. "Respect." Rava stepped into the ring, her golden eyes burning with pride. She placed her clawed hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Mate," she said simply, the word carrying weight and finality. The alpha rose slowly, favoring his wounded leg. "Then he is yours," he told her, "and yours is now protected." The circle broke, the warriors melting into the snow beyond. The ridge, Daniel's legs felt like lead, but Rava stayed close, steadying him with one arm. "You fought well," she said. "I fought to stay with you," he answered. Her hum, low, deep, madge, and strange, vibrated through him. It was the sound she'd made the night they first shared warmth, but now it was different. Now it was a promise. The snow had stopped by the time Daniel and Rava reached the high ridge again. The world lay quiet under a silver sky. The only sound, the crunch of their boots behind them. The Bloodfang warriors had already faded into the white horizon. Daniel still felt the ache in his arms and legs. Every muscle sore from the fight, but the weight in his chest was lighter. He had faced the alpha and walked away, still breathing, still standing beside Rava. They entered the cave, the familiar warmth of the small fire waiting for them. Rava set down her blade and sat cross-legged, her golden eyes fixed on him. "You have no idea," she began. "What you did tonight will be told in my clan for many seasons." Daniel gave a short laugh, wincing as his ribs protested. "I'm not sure if I want to be famous among wolfkin," he said, her mouth curved in a faint smile. "You are not." "Famous," she corrected. "You are mine." He sat down opposite her, the fire crackling between them. Her words no longer sounded like a threat or a claim. They sounded like something else, something steady and certain for the first time. Since that night in the cabin, Daniel didn't feel like the bond was a trap. It felt like it was. His choice, too. They ate in silence for a while. The firelight cast dancing shadows along the cave walls. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice was quieter. "So, what happens now?" Rava tilted her head, considering. "Now, you meet my clan," she said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And they'll just accept me." "They saw you fight," she replied simply. "They will accept." The journey to her clan took 2 days. They crossed frozen valleys and ridges where the wind screamed against the stone. Rava walked beside him the entire time, never letting the distance between them grow. Once, during a rest, she leaned close and adjusted the strap on his armor. "You wear it wrong," she said, her claws brushing lightly against his chest. Her touch lingered for a moment longer than necessary, and Daniel felt the warmth beneath the cold air. When they finally reached the wolfkin settlement, Daniel's breath caught. The village was carved into the cliffs, lit by glowing crystal lamps that shimmered in the snow. Wolfkin of all sizes moved between stone archways. their eyes turning toward the newcomers. Some tilted their heads in curiosity. Others sniffed the air. Rava walked with her head high, her tail flicking once in silent authority. Daniel stayed close, his instincts telling him not to wander. At the center of the village stood a tall fire pit surrounded by stone pillars. The smell of roasted meat filled the air. An older wolfkin stepped forward, her fur pure white, her eyes sharp and knowing. "Rava," she said, her voice deep. "You bring the human." Rava bowed her head slightly. "He is my mate," she said, her tone calm but unshakable. The older wolfkin studied Daniel for a long moment. Then she stepped closer and reached out, her claw tracing the edge of the mark on his neck. "He carries your bond," she said. "More to the gathered crowd than to him, and he carries the strength to defend it." A ripple of murmurs spread. Through the watching wolfkin, some nodded, others crossed their arms, but none spoke against it. That night, they celebrated. Wolfkin feasts were nothing like the quiet dinners Daniel knew. There was roaring laughter, deep-voiced songs, and heavy mugs of hot spiced drink. Rava sat beside him the entire time, introducing him to those who approached. Once, a younger wolfkin asked if the human could really fight. Rava's grin was sharp. He fought the Bloodfang Alpha, she said, and won when the fire burned low and the stars were sharp above the cliffs. Rava led him away from the noise. They walked to a high ledge where the snow glittered under. The moonlight, for a long while, neither spoke. Finally, Rava turned to him, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it when the storm came that night. "I thought I would die," she said. "I thought my last breath would be alone. But you shared your warmth." Daniel looked at her, his breath misting in the cold. "And you shared yours," he said quietly. Her golden eyes held his in my. "People, that is the first and truest bond," she said. "Not the mark, not the fight, but the choice to keep each other alive." Daniel stepped closer. "Then I guess I'm glad the heater broke," he said with a small smile. Her hum, deep and steady, rose again, the sound that had once felt strange, but now felt like home. Without thinking, he matched it, the two tones blending in the cold air. Rava's claws rested gently against his shoulder, her warmth seeping through the layers between them. The wind carried their breath into the night sky. The galaxy might see them as impossible, but here, on this frozen ridge, they were not human and wolfkin. They were simply mates, and that was enough.